Hello from Diplomatic Language Services, and welcome to our podcast, Language Matters. We make language accessible to everyday people by discussing features which may not exist in other languages. I'm your host, Molly Sampson. Welcome back. This is Language Matters, the podcast for Diplomatic Language Services. I'm your host, Molly. I'm here today with Fatima. She's originally from Iran. She's been an employee off and on for many years with DLS, and she's a Farsi linguist. And also I have Faradun, and he is the supervisor here at DLS for Afghan, Central Asian, and Arabic languages. Also a Pashto and Dari linguist. So, Hobasti?
خوب هستیم. مرسی.
سلام چطور هستی؟
Oh, so in Farsi, do you say merci for thank you?
We say merci, we say متشکرم, we say ممنون, we say different things.
Oh, interesting. You don't use it in Dari?
We don't use the word mercy, but we use تشکر in different forms as well.
I see. There are a lot of different opinions on the difference between Farsi, Persian Farsi or Dari Farsi. So let's talk a little bit about the origin of the language and the region where it's spoken and where it comes from.
Farsi, Persian Farsi is spoken in Iran, and Dari Farsi is spoken in Afghanistan. But as far as I know, Farsi has been spoken in other countries like Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, even some part of India, Oman, and Bahrain.
Yes, that's Dari, or the other word for Farsi. These two words are used interchangeably in Afghanistan. When I was going to elementary school, we used to call it Farsi in Afghanistan, but the textbook would say Dari. But in Afghanistan, it's mostly used interchangeably.
I see. So it's also spoken in Tajikistan. Do you call it Tajik in Tajikistan, or is it also called Farsi in Tajikistan?
In Tajikistan, it's called Tajiki. So it's the same language like Farsi. They speak Farsi, but the written language is different, and they use the other fonts called Cyrillic, I guess.
Okay, so in Tajikistan, they use this alphabet, but it's basically the language is very similar. But in Dari and Farsi, Persian Farsi and Dari Farsi, you use the Arabic script, is that right?
That's right, yeah. In Farsi, in Afghanistan and Iran, we use the Arabic script. I myself personally consider this as one language and three different dialects. The dialect that's spoken in Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. When we speak to each other as native speakers, we can easily understand each other, but there could be times that we may not understand a word or so because some words may be different from one region to the other or from one dialect to the other dialect.
That's right. And the alphabet for Farsi is the same alphabet like Arabic, but in Arabic there are 4 letters that they do not exist. Those are P, Ch, G, and J, but in Farsi they do exist. Meaning these 4 letters, they do not exist in Arabic. So some say that, and back in the history, the reason that Persian as Parsi changed to Farsi, it was because the letter P did not exist in Arabic, and when Arabs came to Iran, they changed at Parsi to Farsi.
I see. Do you know this historical point as well?
I didn't know about this, but I knew that it was called both Parsi or Farsi.
I see. So let's talk about, Farah a little brought up the differences in the language. Let's talk a little bit about how different they are in speaking, I guess, mostly. Maybe some examples of how that plays out.
Before we give examples, just I wanted to add that when it is spoken conversationally, the difference could be more than when it's spoken at a very formal and higher level. For example,
so the colloquial versions are much more different than the formalized versions.
Correct.
That you might hear in the news.
Yes. For example, when I listen to BBC Persian, I don't feel as if I'm listening to a language that is different than my native language. But when we go to colloquially, like day-to-day conversation, there could be some differences.
That's right. Yes, like when local people speak with each other, we do understand each other, but there might be some accents or some of the words that are more colloquial that only that region or those local understand and not the locals of like Iran.
But even among Dari speakers in Afghanistan and Farsi speakers in Iran, are there a lot of variations within the countries itself?
Well, for Farsi, yes, like we have areas that they speak Turkish, and well, that's completely different. We have other dialects of Farsi in Iran, like in the south part, in northern part of Iran, in the east and the west. They each have their own dialect. The borders to Afghanistan, they do speak very much like Pashto and Dari Farsi.
And yes, similarly in Afghanistan, Farsi Dari, different parts of the country may have different accents, or some would call it different dialects. For example, in Herat, which is a neighboring country with Iran, it's more influenced by the dialect or accent which is spoken in Iran than Kabul, which is the capital of the country.
That's true. Just like Sistan and Balochistan in south east of Iran, they all speak Pashto, and even their customs and their ceremonies are very much like Afghan.
But just for people that don't know, Pashto is a completely different language.
Yes.
That's also spoken primarily in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Let's go back to the differences. So do you guys want to talk about how these differences express themselves in the language?
There are some examples, like in Dari Farsi, the word car, in Farsi, in Persian Farsi, we call it mashin or khodro, which means automobile. The exact translation for automobile, khodro. But in Dari, Feridun, what do they call it?
We call it motar, which is a borrowed word from English, but a different one.
Mutar. So that's interesting, because the first time I heard mutar, I thought it's a motorcycle. I didn't know it was referred to a car.
And another example could be the word bicycle. In Afghanistan, we call it bicycle, but in Iran...
Yeah, they call it docharkhe, which is the right translation of two wheels, do charkhe.
I see. So it sounds like in Afghanistan you have a lot of English borrowed words. Is that a cultural adaptation, or you just happen to pick up the English, and in Iran you didn't? Is there a cultural influence there?
I think in general the trend in the recent years, or maybe recent centuries, recent couple of centuries, the trend in Iran is that they do not borrow English words that often as we do it in Afghanistan. They come up with an equivalent in Dari, for example, docharkha, which literally means bicycle, like two cycles. But in Afghanistan, we simply have accepted. But that's not the only area of differences. For example, when it comes to military terminology, in Afghanistan, most of the military terminology are either Pashto or Turkish origin. But my understanding is that in Iran, they may use different terminology. For example, the ranks for major, we say Jagran, but in Farsi...
we say Sargord.
And do you know the origin of Sargord? Is it a Farsi origin or like a Persian
As far as I know,
origin?
it's a Farsi word. I guess so, yes.
And the origin of Jagran is Pashto. The rank...
I see.
Or there are other words that in Farsi they're also borrowed words, like computer. But in Farsi, they have been trying in the past years, in recent years, to create the Farsi word for that borrowed word. For example, computer is also common as rayane, which I guess in Dari Farsi they don't use rayane, right?
Correct. We use only the word computer. We pronounce it a little bit differently, like computer, but it's the same word.
I see. Do you have any Russian influence that comes into Dari at all?
Not really. We do not. It's not. Dari was not influenced by, or has not been influenced that much by Russian. It's more influenced by English and Pashto and Turkish than Russian.
Like in Farsi, we have a lot of influence of French. Actually, we had more of
So,
French words,
thus
just
merci,
like
yeah.
merci comes from, yes. We had more influence of French, and then we had the influence of English.
Do you have a
words.
lot of other words that come from French that would be different from
Um,
Farsi and Dari or Persian? And Dari?
Yes, like I cannot remember now, but I guess douche or shower, things like that. That's one of them. Meswak. Some of these words are coming from French, or like
What do you say for shower? Do you say douche for shower?
douche. Yes.
Do you say that for?
We do not use the word douche. We use either the word shower or we use a different word to wash your body. We literally translated سر خود را شستن.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we have other words too. I know that the government of Iran, like the Farsi government of Iran, they have started like a campaign thing to create more Farsi words
I see.
and do not using borrowed words from other
To
countries.
kind of preserve the language.
Yes.
So I guess we'll see how that works out since it's becoming more and more global.
Yeah.
All languages are becoming more and more global.
And a similar trend has started in Afghanistan as well, especially in the last 15 years.
I see.
It's some people consider it a linguistic move. Others also call it a political move as well. So it's a very sensitive topic in Afghanistan, like the difference between Farsi and Dari. But we'll not touch upon that.
I see. So for the written language, is the written language exactly the same aside from these vocabulary words?
The written language is the same. So
the grammar is...
Yeah, the structure, the grammar is different a little bit, but the alphabet is the same, the writing is the same. But grammar-wise, we have certain ways of writing it. I guess in Dari, they have a more strict grammar, but in Farsi, sometimes we kind of simplify that grammar to just adapt it to the colloquialism of the country.
Yeah, and maybe one example could be the present tense and the present continuous tense.
Yes.
Because in Afghanistan, we have one tense to express something that usually happens or that happens right now. We will
For so non-grammar people, that's I go or I am going. So
Yes.
you use the same grammar to express those two different...
Correct. We only use, if we want to express I'm going now, we'll use the word now. Otherwise, it will have the same structure. But in Iran, they have...
we add another part to the sentence to emphasize that right now I'm doing that action. Like man daram miram. Right now, it means right now I'm going. But the word is not now. It's just another piece of the grammar that is added.
I see. So like a little article or particle or something goes onto the verb? Is that...
Yes, kind of. It means like I am at the state of going. So
Okay.
that state word is added to mean the present tense.
Okay, I'll leave it at that because going too far into grammar isn't the most exciting thing. So let's talk about when I sometimes get confused because a lot of people will say I speak Farsi and they mean a lot of different things. Or sometimes you see, I think in our work we see usually Persian Farsi is a different code than sometimes it's Afghan Farsi, sometimes it's Dari, sometimes it's Farsi Dari. So from your different perspectives, maybe from an Iranian perspective, not your personal perspective, and then from an Afghan perspective, how do they interpret these two different but same language?
Again, as I said earlier, if you live in Iran and you have never been out of Iran, you would never ever say that there is another Farsi. They guess that Farsi is the Farsi of Iran, and they would not even call it Farsi, Persian Farsi. They just assume Farsi is for Iran. But when you come out and you see other languages, you get to know that, oh, there are other Farsi that's called like Dari or Tajiki
Yes, this I know, like here in the United States, especially for learning, when people like to learn a language, these Farsi Persian or Dari Farsi are coded differently. I would say these are two different dialects. Especially for new learners, they could be very different. Like if someone wants to go to Afghanistan, then it would be advisable for them to study the language that's spoken there, that's Dari Farsi, or regardless of the name. But if a person wants to visit Iran, then it will be good for them to learn a language from a person who has lived or grown up in Iran, so that they get the language that will be used in that region. But when it comes to native speakers, then it's a little different, because native speakers, especially in Afghanistan, do not consider Farsi and Dari as two different languages. They consider them as one language coming from a same root, since now, due to the differences in geography, there have been some differences. But if we go back to, for example, 12th century, like Hafiz Shirazi from Iran, when I'm reading the poems, I do not see anything that will tell me that it is not my native language. Or if, for example, maybe someone from Iran, if they read the poems of Rumi, who was from Afghanistan, I don't know if they would assume that it is a different language or a different dialect.
Well, the differences come here, as you see. Like, in Iran, they say that Maulana Rumi was from Iran, was from Persia. But I also heard it that in Tajikistan, they say that Maulana was from Tajikistan, and in Afghanistan, they say that Maulana was from Afghanistan. So we see these differences that, people have.
It's like hummus is from the entire Mediterranean region, right?
The only difference is his full name is Maulana Rumi Balkhi, and Balkh is a province in Afghanistan right now. But of course, we will not agree on this. Let's say that correct.
So there are some political or cultural differences in where things come from and how they were taken by that culture.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think that's the end of our podcast. And tashakkur, Fatima. Tashakkur, Feridun.
خواهش میکنم. Merci.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Language Matters. To our listeners, you can continue the conversation by tweeting us at DiplomaticLS, or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Diplomatic Language Services.